Chronicles 7 verse 14. If my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray, and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, and I will forgive their sin, and will heal their land. Now it is interesting to note that prayer and seeking God's face are listed separately here. If my people which are called by my name shall humble themselves and pray, number one, and seek my face, number two. They are listed separately. Now you can pray and seek the face of God, but not all praying is seeking the face of God. You can pray and seek the hand of God. It's still prayer. But seeking the hand of God is not seeking the face of God. So here, and pray and seek my face. Prayer and seeking God's face are listed separately. Prayer is not necessarily seeking the face of God. It could be seeking the hands of God. It could be maintenance prayer to keep what we already have in God. But seeking the face of God involves more than that, much more than that. Psalms 27 verse 8. When you said, seek my face, my heart said to you, your face, Lord, I will seek. In Psalms 105 verse 4, the word of God commands us, seek the Lord and his strength. Seek his face evermore. See this time, seek his face evermore. And what does it mean to seek God's face? Seeking God's face is seeking God's person and God's presence.
Amen.
Seeking God's face is juxtaposed with seeking God's hand. So to seek God's face is very different to seeking God's hand. It is turning away from our needs and problems and looking up to God. The Hebrew word translated face is the exact same word translated as presence when referring to God's presence. The word face is a Hebrew idiom that means the presence of God. So every time you see the face of God, it speaks of the presence of God. It's an idiomatic expression referring to the presence of God. The Bible says no man has seen God and lived. So when the Bible talks about seeing God's face, it's not literally talking about the face or your face and my face. It's used in reference to God's presence. So seeking the Lord means seeking his presence. Presence is a common translation of the Hebrew word face. This is the Hebraic way of having access to God. This phrase refers to access to God. To seek God's face is to seek God's presence. Can someone say amen?
Amen.
Psalm 24 verse 6 states, this is the generation that seek him, that seek thy face, O Jacob. Selah. So to seek God's face literally means to seek his manifest presence. When we seek the face of God, we seek his presence. To be before his face is to be in his presence. Seeking his face is seeking his person, the brightness of his personal character, which is hidden behind the curtain of our carnal desires. So, here's the other thing. So, God's face speaks of God's presence. Secondly, God's face speaks of God's character. It speaks of who he is. Can someone say amen? As Christians, we are called to seek the face of God, not just his hand. That is not just what he does for us or he gives to us, but also we need to seek who he is. Amen. So seeking the face of God is getting to know God.
Amen. Amen.
Is seeking to know God. What I find most wonderful about seeking God's face is that his face does not represent any actions. One does not seek God's face for protection or for favors. One seeks it for fellowship. When we talk about seeking the face of God, seeking His presence, that's not where you go with a list of things that you want from God. You are not going there to ask God for anything. You are going there to enjoy fellowship with Him. You are going there to enjoy His presence. You are going there to commune with Him. You are going there to fellowship with Him. You are going there to get to know Him. You see, God is an infinite being. The word infinite means unlimited. And man is a finite being. That means man is limited. And so, a finite being cannot get to know an infinite being at once. Man, as a finite being, has no capacity to know all there is to know about God at once. So God reveals Himself progressively. So it is in His presence where God reveals other aspects of His character so that we grow in the knowledge of God. There are other dimensions, other facets of God that are only revealed in the secret place, in His presence. So many people get caught up with the hand of God, but they don't know God. They don't grow in the knowledge of God. You see, the new birth experience is not the culmination of the knowledge of God, it's the beginning point of knowing God. We grow in the knowledge of God. You see, a lot of Christians thrive on a second-hand revelation. Everything they know about God is what someone told them, is what they have read. Is there anything wrong with that? Of course, it's not. There's nothing wrong with that. But if the sum total of everything you know about God is what you've read about, but there's nothing you have discovered personally in His presence, then you are thriving on a second-hand revelation. So it is in the place of God's presence where we get to know who He is. His hand, we only know what He can do. In the secret place, see, He demonstrates His hands in the outer court. But His face is seen in the secret place. What's in a face? Proverbs 16 verse 15 says, when a king's face brightens, it means life. His favor like rain cloud in springs. So, there are certain things that you can deduce by looking at a person's face. If you pay close attention to someone else's face, to someone's face, you can see a lot of things. Faces speak. If you are married, you can look at your wife or you can look at your husband. If you know them well, you can tell what they are saying to you, whether they like what you are doing or they don't like what they are doing. Even as children, you knew your mommy, you knew if she looked at you, you knew what she meant. If she looked at you below the glasses, you knew what that meant. If she looked at you from above the glasses and she went like this, you also knew without anybody telling you. That is why we say there is body language. So, faces speak. It is only in His presence that we can see the face of God and get to understand what He has in His heart. Only when we begin to see the face of God can He begin to speak to us. Hands don't talk, they only do. The mouth is on the face. You can tell a lot about how someone is feeling just by looking at the person's face. An expression can reveal a person's mood, happiness, sadness, anger, or annoyance. You are able to read a person's emotions through their facial expressions and know how that person feels in the moment. Face-to-face conversation provides an opportunity for intimate connection. Can someone say amen?
Amen.
Now, it is interesting that the Greek word for face, is prosopon, means literally towards the eye. Now, when you are seeking God's face, you are not seeking to see a physical face or imagine God with a face. You are also not merely seeking God's presence. You are seeking to know God's heart and His mind and His will and His ways. The problem is that most people that are seeking God are seeking His hands, not His heart and mind. They are seeking what He can do for them. So we must understand that we are not seeking His hands and we are not looking for results or an experience when we are in His presence, when we seek His face. It's not for what He can do for us. Get this. Seeking the hand of God is what He can do for you. Seeking the face of God, it's not what He can do for you. So when you seek His face, you seek His person, His presence. The key there is fellowship. The key there is getting to know God. Very seldom do God's people decide, let me just go into the presence of God. Father, I worship you. I give you all the glory. I give you all the praise, the thanksgiving and adoration. I love you. Father, I've just come to love you. I want you to know I love you. I appreciate you. I'm just here. I want to commune with you. I just want to know your heart. I just want to know your heartbeat. I just want to know what the burdens of your heart. Father, is there anything you want to send me to do? Is there any burden you want me to help carry? Is there anything you want me to birth in prayer? Father, what is your heart concerning our church? Is there anything you are saying in our church? Is there anything you want me to do? I'm here, Father. Send me whatever it is you want to do. I'm here to worship you, to fellowship with you, to love on you, and you spend time in His presence. You see, one thing that I've discovered, Apostle, at the church when we used to pray, every January we pray. I'm this guy that I like long prayers. I like praying long hours. I enjoy it. But we used to pray long hours and we will tremble under the anointing and so on until the Lord began to speak to me. He says, it's okay to pray long hours. There's saturation, there's breakthrough and all that. He says, but if you want to teach the church to pray, you need a strong word foundation, because the effectiveness of your prayer life is not determined by its longevity necessarily. Sometimes you can pray longer and flaunt the principles in the process, and someone can pray shorter and get a quick breakthrough. It's not in the length of the prayer. Neither is it in a person's oratorical abilities. It is in embracing simple biblical principles of prayer. So he said, teach the people the word on prayer. So we started doing that, and we started to see significant growth and improvement. Sometimes you think sometimes we think that the more I pray, the more I can twist God's arm, the more I can manipulate God to talk to me, the more I bombard heaven and I make noise, the quicker God will respond. No, it doesn't work that way. You see, prayer is not a means of breaking God's reluctance to get Him to do what He doesn't want to do. But true prayer is aligning ourselves with God's purposes. So here's the problem, here's the challenge. Most of us, we treat prayer as a monologue and not as a dialogue. Can I tell you the greatest challenge that we all have? I'm also learning to deal with that challenge in the place of prayer. The greatest challenge in the place of prayer is not necessarily praying. It's keeping quiet so that God can speak back to us. You see, sometimes you say, now I'm praying, and we can spend 3 hours talking, 3 hours bombarding heaven, 3 hours praying in the spirit, 3 hours praying. And we say, in Jesus' name I have prayed. We look at the watch, 3 hours is gone. We've been talking to God for 3 hours, and after that, we take our Bibles, we wipe our tears, we go to the kitchen, and we start doing some other things. So for 3 hours, you've been talking to God, but have you given God, how much time have you given God to talk back to you? The greatest part in prayer is listening to God and not talking to God. And that's the part we fail to master. The greatest challenge is to be still in the presence of God. The greatest challenge is to be able to harness our racing minds, to deal with distractions in the presence of God. The Bible says, be still and know that I'm God. Our greatest challenge is to remain still in His presence, because our minds are racing all over the place. And so we think that if I'm having an all-night prayer, we will pray from 10 o'clock until 5 a.m. So from 10 to 5, we pray, we bombard heaven, we bind the devil, then we start talking to God, and then by 5 a.m. in Jesus' name we have prayed, amen. Woo! Wow, I feel lighter, I feel good. Woo! There's a release, I'm going home. And God is saying, but you've been talking, I've been listening to you for 5 hours. Wouldn't you have the decency to allow me time to speak to you? Can you imagine what in the natural, if you were to go to a person and they are listening to you and you are talking to them for 3 hours non-stop and they are listening, and then when you finish, you just take your bags and you leave. You don't give them the opportunity to respond. This is what we do to God. Prayer is a dialogue, not a monologue. Prayer is talking to God and listening to Him. The listening part. Even in communication, it could be marriage, it could be in communication. One of the things that is a biggest problem is the ability to listen. We don't listen well. So prayer is a dialogue, not a monologue. Prayer is a two-way communication. Prayer is talking to God and then God talks back to us. Now, in seeking the face of God, you don't just go there to rattle your mouth and talk. You become still and you listen. That's why you go in there with a pen and paper. It is called practicing the presence of God. You know, it may not even be prayer. It could be in worship. It could be in your own personal life or in the services that you have here. When the presence of God comes into a place, when you begin to sense His manifest presence, when the presence of God is there in that prayer room, in that prayer closet, and you sense the presence of God heavy on you, that's not the time to leave the prayer closet.
Yeah.
Stay and soak in the presence of God. Stay and be saturated in the presence of God. Wait until it lifts off you. Because the fact that the presence of God is still heavy on you, that means God is still dealing with some things in you.
Amen.
Stay saturated like a sponge. Soak into that anointing.
Amen.
Remain in an attitude of worship. Commune with God until the anointing lifts.
Yeah.
Then you know, I'm done. Then you walk out. But many of us, we walk out trembling. You are still shaking. Sometimes you even fall. It should tell you God is not done with you yet. You see, the reason why most believers only want to seek the hand of God and not His face is because of fear. Fear to lose control. Fear to yield. Because in the presence of God, you have to let go and let God.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen it? That is why some people, even during worship, when you begin to worship the Lord and the presence of God comes, and you begin to sense that God is taking over, instead of yielding, you pull back. How many of you understand what I'm talking about? You know why some people pull back? I'm not sure what's going to happen. We don't want to lose control. Because we think God will kill us. So we don't want to let go. Others, because of guilt and condemnation, they are afraid to meet God. You see, this is what happened to Adam. When Adam sinned, the first thing he did was to hide. Because of guilt, because of condemnation, because of shame. And let me tell you something. If one does not live a consecrated life, seeking the face of God will not be their favorite. Because you need to understand that in the presence of God, we see Him in His holiness. And as we see Him in His holiness reflects our wretchedness. This is what happened to Isaiah in Isaiah chapter 6. When he had an encounter with God in Isaiah chapter 6, he says, "Woe is me, for I am undone. I'm a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips." This is a messianic prophet. This is Isaiah the prophet. All of a sudden, nobody asked him a question. In the presence of the Lord, he says, "I am a man of unclean lips, and I dwell in the midst of people of unclean lips." And the angel took the coal and put it on his lips, and he was cleansed. Woe is me. There is a woe in the presence of God. You see, that is why even in our services, God can only release His presence in a measure that we can handle. That's why John in the island of Patmos, he said, "I fell down to the ground as a dead man." I'll never forget, my father in the Lord and I were in a meeting in Nazareth a couple of years ago. Benny Hinn was ministering. We were standing next to the platform. And all of a sudden, the glory of God swept into that place. About 10,000 people were there. Benny Hinn did not tell us to do anything. It was during worship. My father in the Lord was standing next to me. Everybody started weeping. I don't know how and when I started weeping. When he started weeping, we started weeping, and we were all lying prostrate on the floor. Nobody told us, lie on the floor. But the glory of God was in the place. You felt as if you will die if you didn't confess your sins. You felt, even the sins you did not commit, I'm sure, at least I confessed, even the sins I did not commit that day. Nobody, but the glory, the presence of God. You see, that is why you can't seek the face of God if you don't live a consecrated life. Because you see, guilt and condemnation and your lifestyle, you will not be sure what will happen to you. And these things will become a hindrance. And when you get into the presence of God, and you will not let go, you will not want to lose and let go. And if you don't let go, you will grieve the Holy Spirit. You won't get deeper and deeper. Why is it that most people and most musicians don't like worship? They like entertainment. True worship, when you truly worship God and you yield yourself to Him, He takes over. You get an encounter. And if you are not sure about your relationship with God, where you stand with God, then you hold back. Because you say, God will kill me. Have you ever wondered why most believers don't have a prayer life? This is not the only reason. There are many reasons. But one of the reasons is they still want to maintain control, because you cannot pray consistently and still have your way all the time.
Amen.
So when we talk about seeking the face of God, we are talking about seeking His person, growing in the knowledge of Him, seeking His presence. The Bible says in Exodus 33 verse 11, the Lord will speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks with his friend. That speaks of intimacy. You see, seeking the hand of God, it's outer court. There's no intimacy with God. But seeking the face of God speaks of intimacy. Moses would speak to God, with God face to face as a man speaks with his friend. This doesn't mean Moses could literally see God's face, but it is better translated presence to presence. Moses talked to God face to face. We often talk about the presence of God, but we can only experience the presence when we are seeking the face of God. And when Moses left the presence of the Lord, his countenance would shine with the Shekinah glory of God. Remember, when he came down to the mountain, the people had to place a veil to cover, themselves, to cover his, because Moses shone with the Shekinah glory of God. You can never, spend time in God's presence and not be transformed and not be transfigured. Remember in the gospel according to Luke, Jesus took Peter, James, and John to the mountain and for a prayer encounter. And the Bible says that as Jesus prayed, his face was transfigured. There is a transfiguration that takes place in God's presence. You can never go in there and remain the same. There must be evidence that, God has wrapped himself off you. And so when Moses, after 40 days seeking the face of God, he would come down the mountain, the Shekinah glory of God would be shining, and people would not be able to look at his face. When Moses left the presence of the Lord, his face was with the Shekinah glory of God. Now, here's the other thing. The face of God also speaks of his ways, his character, his mind, his will, and wisdom. It speaks of knowing him. When you say, I know the person, do you say, I know the person because you've seen their hand? Can you identify a person by their hand? Even with criminals. When someone is robbed and they catch some suspects, do they say, look at their hands to see if they're the ones, or do you look at their faces? So you know a person by looking at their face. So seeking God's face speaks of knowing God. Seeking God's face speaks of getting to know God personally. It speaks of knowing his ways and his secrets. Now, in Exodus 33 verse 11, Moses prayed, Lord, show me now thy ways. And we read in Psalms 103 verse 7 that his prayer was answered. The Bible says he made known his ways unto Moses and his acts unto the children of Israel. How could Moses know his ways? Because he was a man of God's presence. God revealed his ways to Moses because Moses was a man of God's presence. You see, secret things are revealed in the secret place.
Amen. Yes.
Secret things are revealed in the secret place. So Moses knew the ways of God, but the children of Israel, the acts of God, he made known his ways unto Moses, his acts to the children of Israel. Now there are two levels of knowledge that is spoken of here. The two knowledge of God. Number one, you can know God's ways or you can know God's acts. You can know God's ways or you can know God's works. Moses knew God's ways, but Israel knew God's works. Those are two different things. And most of God's people today know God's works and not his ways. Throughout Israel's wandering in the desert and in their later history in the promised land, we find God's people interested only in what God will do for them. To them, God displayed his mighty acts, but only a few got close enough to learn his ways. Moses knew God's ways, while the children of Israel were caught up in what he can do. They knew the miracles, but they didn't know God behind them, the God behind the miracles. In the New Testament too, we find that it was only those who walked closely with Jesus that discovered his ways. They were the inner circle that he had handpicked, the ones we call apostles. And we know that Paul was later on chosen as an apostle after his personal encounter with the risen Christ. Jesus disclosed many things to them that he did not share with others. Though there were hundreds that followed him around, it was his miracles that attracted them. So there's a difference between God's ways and God's acts. Both in the Old and the New Testament, we find that God's ways were made known to an inner circle of people, but the ordinary congregation only learned his acts. The ones who sought his presence were those who learned his ways. And we see that in the Old Testament, men like Moses and David, for an example, are two outstanding examples of people in the Old Testament who knew God's ways. Moses said, "Show me your ways." David prayed the same prayer. They knew the ways of God. Why? Because they were men who sought the face of God. The ways of God are known in the presence of God. So while the children of Israel were caught up in the hand of God, they did not know the ways of God. No wonder why from time to time they would mess up. What defines your Christianity? What defines your walk with God? As a child of God, when you look at your life and you say, "I'm a child of God, I'm a child of God, I'm born again," what defines it? Is it what he does for you? Or is it the relationship, the intimate relationship you have with him? Is God distant to you? Or is he intimate? Why did Moses know the ways of God? He was a man of God's presence. He was a man that sought the face of God. In Deuteronomy 34 verse 10, the Bible says, "Since then no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face." You know, I know that most of us can say, "Yeah, but Apostle, you know, I would like to know the face of God, but I'm not perfect. I've got my issues. I'm waiting until I become perfect." If you are waiting for that, that will not happen. Go and into God's presence as you are. It is in God's presence that you will be transformed. You know why I say that? The same man Moses, he had issues, anger problem. See, that doesn't mean that if you seek the face of God, you will be perfect, you will be sinless, you won't have mistakes. Of course, the more you yield yourself to God, the more holy you become. But that doesn't make you perfect. Amen. Moses still had anger problems. In fact, when he broke the tablets of the 10 Commandments, he was coming down from the mountain after fasting for 40 days. You would think that no, because he was with God for 40 days and 40 nights in the mountain fasting he will exercise self-control. But he broke the tablets of the 10 Commandments. Anger. It is anger that caused him not to get to the promised land. So I don't want to paint a picture that to seek the face of God, you must be this holy Christian. Apostle Ndobe spoke about seeking the face of God. I still have issues. Let me just walk around seeking his hand. Some of you can seek his face. I'm coming. I'm still dealing with. No. Go as you are. Can I tell you this? The more you seek the face of God as you are, the more transformation will take place. Let me give you an example. What about Jacob? Jacob had an encounter. He was alone. He was a crook, a trickster, a supplanter. But in Genesis 32, the Bible says he was left alone. And at Peniel, he said, I saw God face to face. And his name was changed from Jacob to Israel. Right there in the presence of God. Your appetite will change when you get there. The things that bind you will be broken when you get there. Amen. The things that deliverance workers could not get rid of will be destroyed when you get there. You are not going there to ask for deliverance. No, you are going there just to behold him, just to worship him, just to love him, just to commune with him. Chains will be broken. There are deliverances that will occur without you asking. There are things that will melt in the presence of God. There are demons that will run away and leave you because they can't stand the presence of God. It takes grace and revelation from above to know his ways. His ways are known in his presence. So to seek the face of God means to go to God, to get to know more about him without a selfish motive. It is going to God to see who he is. In fact, when you get there, you don't get to know about him. You get to know him. Because there are two different things. It's one thing to know about someone. It's another thing to know someone. If I say I know about Prophet Shiwunda, does that mean I know him? No. But if I say I know him, that means first-hand revelation. Yeah. So there are many believers who know about God. They know about God. They know about his power. They know about his miracles. They know about his provision, but they don't know him. There are sinners who don't have a relationship with God that know about him. Let me prepare to close. You see, if I seek his face, I will know his ways. God's ways are known by seeking him. Those who delight in God's ways seek him in prayer. Isaiah 58 verse 2. Yet they seek me daily and delight to know my ways. You see, those who delight to know the ways of God seek God daily. Seek his face daily. If I seek God's face, I will grow in the knowledge of God. When I seek God's face, I grow in the knowledge of God. You see, the secret place is a place of God's presence. It is a place of knowing God. Job 22 verse 21, the first part says, now acquaint yourself with him. To be familiar with God. Not in a negative way, but to be familiar in the sense of getting to know him. In Philippians 3 verse 10, listen to what Paul says. That I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being conformed to his death. Now, Paul, after 50 years of ministry, it was after 50 years of ministry when he wrote this. he still had a consuming desire to know him. Oh, that I may know him. The word know here is the word which means to know God as a man knows his wife. It means to know God intimately. To know God intimately. To know God intimately as a man knows his wife sexually. You see, even intimacy between couples, it does not take place in the open. It takes place in the secret. To be intimate with God, you have to have a meeting place. You have to get to the secret place. Amen. Secret things belong to the secret place. Amen. There are certain things that are not for public consumption that God wants to reveal to you in the secret place. That's why the Bible says God does nothing until he reveals his secrets to his servants, the prophets. Why? Because prophets, generally, even in the Old Testament, they are people of God's presence. Amen. If you study Jeremiah, you study all these prophets, Daniel, all of them, they were men of God's presence. They were seeking God. It is in the secret place where we get to know God. We can never really get to know God unless we get alone with him. The only place to know God is in the prayer closet. Prayer is man's means to know God intimately. Someone said he knows not God who knows not how to pray. See, God reveals himself progressively. That is why we need a series of encounters. Because it is in the place of prayer, in the place of encounter, where God reveals different aspects of his character, and we grow in the knowledge of him. God's ways are known by seeking him in the secret place. Psalm 77 verse 13. Your way, O God, is in the sanctuary. Who is so great a God as our God? It says your way is in the sanctuary. The secret place, the place of God's presence, is a place of transformation. When you behold his face, his presence, you are transformed. 2 Corinthians 3:18, and we all who with unveiled faces contemplate the Lord's glory are being transformed into his image with ever increasing glory, which comes from the Lord who is the Spirit. When you spend time in the presence of the Lord, transformation takes place. Looking on the face of God transforms us into his image. We become like the things we focus on. Coming into the presence of God, you will never be the same again, because his divine presence brings transformation and holiness. You see, you ultimately become like the people you spend time with. Jacob at Peniel in Genesis 32 verses 24 to 30. He had an encounter with God. He had a collision with God. He saw God face to face and he was transformed. That word encounter means to collide with God. The word encounter is not a friendly word. It's a very violent word. You know, encounter as it pertains to our relationship with God, it means to collide with God. It means to meet God face to face. Let me give you a picture. And you can't meet God face to face and remain the same. Think about this, a Mini Cooper. And think about a Mini Cooper having a head-on collision with a big Mack truck. What will happen to the big Mack truck? Nothing. What will happen to the Mini Cooper? Beyond recognition. You won't recognize a Mini Cooper. But the big Mack truck will still be intact. You know, imagine you and I as being that Mini Cooper and God as the big Mack truck. When we collide with God, we are changed beyond recognition. Amen. And it is in His presence where the collision takes place. Isaiah collided with God. His iniquity was taken from his mouth. Saul of Tarsus, the persecutor of the church, had an encounter and he collided with God in Acts chapter 9. And he ended up surrendering. He ended up saying, "What will you have me to do, Lord?" Because an encounter with God leaves you on the ground. It doesn't leave you standing. He was knocked off from his horse, right on the ground. An encounter leaves you lying prostrate before God. He says, "What will you have me do, Lord?" for the first time. He called someone Lord. Because a place of encounter is a place of surrender. You are subdued. You are transformed. Let me close by seeking the heart of God. Seeking God's face is not the final step. There is another, to seek God's heart. The final level is the searching the heart of Jesus. This is the highest level attained by the saints. See, you can see a person's face, but you may not be able to access his heart. What does it mean to seek his heart? By heart, we don't mean the seat of feeling and emotion, but the very deepest springs of a person. If we seek God's heart, we seek to value what God values, love what He loves, and even hate what He hates. We become matured sons. We become like God in some ways, so that when people look at us, they see something of God. When we seek the heart of God and we have the heart of God, what grieves God grieves us. What burdens God burdens us. What God hates, we hate. Our heart synchronizes with God's heart. We are able to pick up God's emotions. And if we have God's heart, then we'll most naturally do what He wants. Amen. Without being told, we will do what He wants. Because our very natures and wills will be freely aligned to God's will. And so the world will rejoice when it sees the appearing of these sons of God. Because they will look at us and say, indeed, these are the sons of God. In other words, we will represent God in totality. The hearts of the people who seek and find the heart of God are intertwined to the sacred heart of God. God lives in them and they live in Him. It is an extreme act of love that intertwines two hearts and makes them one. 1 John 1 verse 3, the Bible says, "Truly our fellowship is with the Father and with His Son, Jesus Christ." Fellowship in the Greek word is koinonia, which literally means partnership and communion. God desires that our heart becomes one with His heart. God's desire is that we would become united with Him. We are to dwell in Him and He in us. Seeking the heart of God. This is the highest level. It cannot get higher than this. That is why Jesus' heart synchronized with the heart of His Father. He says, "As I see my Father do, so I do." He says, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. He represented His Father in totality. He never misrepresented Him. In conclusion, we need to seek God. And we need to seek three. We need to seek God's hand, God's face, and God's heart. The hand of God is demonstrated in the outer court, but the face of God is seen in the secret closet of prayer. The ways of God, the secrets of God are revealed in the prayer closet. The hand of God is the manifestation of His grace, His unmerited favor. It is the manifestation of His ability. However, we are not to allow or to let seeking the hand of God define our relationship with God. Amen. It is not wrong to seek the hand of God. He said, call upon me in the day of trouble and I will deliver you. Amen. Psalm 50 verse 15. So we need to call on Him. Amen. Thank you, sir. He's our helper in times of trouble. However, if all that defines our relationship with Him is what He does for us, and we go through life just getting things from Him, but we don't know His face and we don't know His heart, then we are not growing in the knowledge of God. Amen. We are just caught up in what He can do for us, but we don't know Him. And this is what God was telling me. He was saying, son, I don't only want to use you, perform miracles, prophesy, bring revelation knowledge. I want that, but that's not the main thing. The main thing is I want a relationship with you. I want you to grow in the knowledge of me. And the more you grow in the knowledge of me, the more the miracles, signs and wonders. Come to think of it. We are not told the contents of Jesus' prayers to the Father. But I'm quite sure that He was focusing on, worshiping His Father, communing with His Father, fellowshipping with His Father. But look at the results, miracles, signs and wonders. You see, many people think that Jesus healed the sick, performed miracles because He was the Son of God. No. Philippians chapter 2, the Bible tells us that He stripped Himself of His divinity and He came in the likeness of man. Jesus was a man. He operated as a man who was anointed by the Holy Ghost. So in Acts chapter 10 verse 38, Jesus of Nazareth, whom God anointed with the Holy Ghost and with power, who went about doing good. If Jesus operated as God, He wouldn't need to be anointed. Yeah. In Luke 4:18, Jesus, and this is the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for He has anointed me. You wouldn't need to be anointed. How do you anoint God? Does God need to be anointed? No. So the reason why Jesus was anointed, He was anointed because He operated as a person. Yes. So He didn't heal because He was God. He didn't perform miracles because He was God. He healed, He performed miracles because He was a man anointed with the Holy Spirit. And so I believe that in His prayer closet, He communed with God. He fellowshiped with God. And what were the results? The manifestation of God's power. I want to say this last thing. That in these last days, and particularly for this church, because this is what I see. This is a prophetic house. A lot of things that will be done in this house will not follow a traditional order. So you will need to catch the spiritual frequency all the time. You will need to be sensitive in the spirit, because things will not, you will be stretched, because one moment God will do things this way, the next moment God will do things a different way. You've got to, I see a picture where, the Lord says you've got to move with the cloud when it moves. Some of you would want to say, why don't we pitch our tents and stay here? But no, all the time you'll have to dismantle your tents in this church, in the spirit, and move on. God will not allow you to be in your comfort zone. You are in a spiritual pilgrimage. And so many of you, God is going to activate you to the prophetic dimension. And many of you, you already have that seed. Many of you, there are several prophets here. I just don't want to prophesy this because, I just don't want to point. Some of you, I'm looking at you and I see you. Some of you are prophetic intercessors right now. Some of you are already activated to a certain degree. Of course, there will be need for training as time goes on. But this house is a place of God's habitation. God wants to inhabit, not to visit. He wants to inhabit. The Bible says God inhabits the praises of his people. So it gives you a clue as to what type of the house this should be. We need to create an atmosphere for God to dwell among us. It's a prophetic house. And so, seek the face of God. And seek the heart of God. Father, tonight we give you praise. We give you glory. We give you honor. We commit your people into your hands. We commit this word that we have spoken. Father God, may it find a resting place in the hearts of your people. May it not return unto you void, but may it accomplish that which you purpose.